Walter Nolen has the talent of a first-round prospect, but he should go nowhere near the first round. Here's why. Ryan, how early would you willingly draft Walter Nolen?
Don't ask me that, Joe. Buyers beware on Walter Nolen. Not in the top 100 for me personally.
So we need to talk about this. His tape is phenomenal. He has some incredible highlights, and there's a reason why some people project him to be maybe even a top 15 pick. You keep seeing him go to the Dallas Cowboys in people's mock drafts, but you and we're not there. Can we dig into this, why we're a little concerned?
I mean, he's a first-round talent without question, and he also had a really productive 2024 season. His best season by far after a couple average years at Texas A&M. He was really good last year at Ole Miss. There's a lot around Walter Nolen, though, Joe. There's a lot around him. And ultimately, on the field, it's you're cashing in potentially on a high-end pass rusher on the interior, but he's a below-average run defender. And there's a lot of talk about the character concerns off of it, right? So we combine those character concerns with a below-average run defender as an interior defensive lineman. That's where I start to have a little bit of my buyers beware conversation and a little bit of, I'm scared of him, man. I'm scared of him, and I'm scared to draft him too early.
We'll get to the strengths in a second, but I'm with you on this. You do hear a little bit about the character concerns, and I think that's one of these instances where it does show up on the film, where he seems almost disinterested in playing good run defense. He doesn't put a lot of effort in trying to anchor at the line of scrimmage, which he can actually do really well. He doesn't put a lot of effort into locating the football and closing down on ball carriers, which he can actually do really well. There's just too many ebbs and flows in the amount of effort that he's giving on a snap-to-snap basis for me.
Well, and I think there's some technical flaws as a run defender as well. I think his base gets a little bit too narrow at times. I just think that he gets kind of knocked off his spot because I don't think he's playing in proper power position all the time against the run. But I do think that overall, Joe, like, this is a player that you're banking on the upside, but the floor is what scares me. And the floor that we always talk about for an interior defensive lineman is the run defense, ultimately, right? Like, we'll talk about the exciting attributes that Walter Nolen has, and we'll continue to talk about it throughout this draft process. But if I'm talking about an interior defensive lineman that I don't know if I'm going to get anything in the run game specifically, consistently, and a guy that I don't think I can count on from a just playing hard perspective every snap, that's kind of a pretty hard sell to me personally.
You need to earn your opportunities on the field by being a great run defender, and then eventually you get to create more opportunities for yourself as you start to win as a pass rusher. The pass rush, though, is where you get excited about Walter Nolen. He is in a rare category of what he could be in the NFL as an interior pass rusher. His flexibility is awesome, his power is awesome, and he's got some really quick hands. All that stuff is worthy of taking a shot on, but realistically somewhere towards the end of day two.
Well, I think that for me, the explosiveness, the ability as a pass rusher, that's why people are super excited and geeked up over a player like a Walter Nolen. And honestly, if you could tell me 100% he's locked in, there's no concerns off the field, and all I'm getting is these splash plays consistently, you could sell me on him as a first rounder in this class, a class that is a little bit lacking at the top and a class that tails off pretty well in the second and third tiers pretty quickly, right? So you can sell me on Walter Nolen in the vacuum. Again, there's just a lot of layers to a process here. A lot of layers. Because this kid, you could stack up the 10 best plays that he had in 2024, and it's as good as anybody on the interior defensive line class. It's up there with the Mason Grahams of the world. You can have that conversation. But ultimately, this is the full process. And we've talked about this on this channel, A to Z Sports Film Room before, Joe. There are some concerning attributes and concerning things about Walter Nolen that has some people kind of dropping him down the boards. There's been a couple of recent mock drafts from some of the big wigs and the talking heads in the industry that have had him out of the first round. There's a reason for those concerns.
Going into his background and who he was as a recruit, Nolen originally started his career at Texas A&M. Coming out of Tennessee, he was the number one ranked defensive line recruit in the country per 247 Sports. He was the second ranked recruit overall in the 2022 class, one of the most prolific recruiting classes ever for a single team with that Texas A&M squad. And of course, he was a 5-star recruit, extremely highly regarded. At Texas A&M, we always saw the flashes, and then when he entered the transfer portal and headed to Ole Miss, there was that hope of, hey, maybe he's amongst this group of other talented guys on an actually winning and highly competitive team that they could take that next step. And kind of like Ole Miss this year, they didn't take the next step that we were hoping for. They kind of got stuck at a ceiling that was there at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, man, that 2022 overhyped Texas A&M team that had like 8 defensive linemen and had like barely any other a couple of positions that were even covered. It was a very interesting 2022 class. But he was a 5-star for a reason coming out of the state of Tennessee. He was a guy that Texas A&M was super geeked up about coming out of the state of Tennessee. And we saw the flashes the first couple of years. He turned those flashes into more consistent play in Ole Miss with over 10 tackles for loss and some sack production this past year. He is, by all accounts, a media darling from the recruiting perspective to potentially being a high NFL draft pick. There's a lot to like about Walter Nolen. Just again, there's some things to consider as well.
All right, closing us out here with a pro comp as we do on all these videos. We had a little bit of a tough time trying to find a good comp for Walter Nolen. Now, he keeps comparing himself to Aaron Donald. We're not going to go there because just physically, they're nowhere near the same. Walter Nolen's much bigger than Aaron Donald was, and also Aaron Donald was a freakish player against the run, and Walter Nolen, as we talked about, is not. The one that we came to a little bit, like not super excitedly, John Franklin Myers, who has carved out a decent career for himself so far as a pass rusher, listed at 6'4", 283 at the NFL Combine with 32 and 7/8 inch arms. And Nolen, who did not test, ends up coming in at 6'4", 296 with 32 and a half inch arms. Not the greatest comp that we've had, but I think it's one of the few that we can really put together that makes some sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's the pass rush upside. It's also the pass rush upside for multiple alignments, right? Like Walter Nolen, whether you're in a 4-man front or a 3-man front at his best, he is that first step, quick defensive tackle that can create some instant penetration, whether you're a 4-man, whether you're a 3-man. I think he has a lot of pass rush upside, similar to what we saw with John and Franklin Myers, who actually began his career as a defensive end that has now become kind of a Swiss Army knife up front. At Nolen's best, I think he can be that style of player and maybe even a better version of a John Franklin Myers.
Folks, comment below, what team do you think Walter Nolen should play for? Hit that like button and subscribe, and we'll talk to you later.